let's talk about the increasingly conflicting versions of Aboriginal history in Australia. The commonly held view these days is that white settlement disrupted what was a peaceful and harmonious existence for the Indigenous people on this continent. One of the people who chronicled the daily life of Indigenous tribes around Adelaide in South Australia was W.A. Crawthorne, who was a distant relative of yours, Alexandra.
Yeah.
Well, his journals are held in various libraries and have been the source material for many historians, and you have a few of his mementos in your family. What did Crawthorne do and what did his journals record?
So his father, W.C. Cawthorne, came over and he was one of the first lighthouse keepers in in South Australia down there. And his son, W.A. Cawthorne, he was a teacher and he was a painter and an artist, and he used to record what he saw. And so when he was in South Australia, he was basically commissioned by the government of South Australia to live with and record Indigenous people down there, because that was obviously part of the time down there. It wasn't some kind of random invasion of violence. The people down there were trying to learn about Indigenous Australians. That was a huge thing that was going on. And so he lived with them. He recorded things like the names of their war implements, of their ceremonies. He recorded what went on, their songs, their belief systems. And he's one of only a handful of primary sources that all these people who are reinventing our history now quote. Of course, they quote him disingenuously, but he was a primary source. Now, he was not a politician. He was not an academic. He was somebody who would observe and record. And so he made his points without a political overture. And of course, they're dated from the time, but they give a great insight into Indigenous culture. And what we don't see in any original text is some kind of frontier war between colonial forces and Indigenous forces. It wasn't. It was as everyone was taught when they were children.
Well, let's get on to the confrontations in a second, because we need to also speak about the Australian War Memorial in that context.
Just before, I was just going to say, it wasn't some peaceful Eden that colonials arrived on. It was a warring nation of tribes who did not share a language, they did not share a culture, and when colonials arrived, they became another tribe on the shores, and sometimes they traded and sometimes they fought, but it was very much nothing related to what we're hearing today.
So what sort of battles did W.A. Crawthorne witness around Adelaide?
So he witnessed some skirmishes, because a lot of, when they were like walking along a river, for instance, they might come across a hostile tribe. And so the Indigenous people they were with would try and avoid these tribes that would just attack anybody they came across. So obviously settlers came across these people, and a lot of the conflicts that are written down are because settlers were attacked, either when they were running cattle or in their homes. And it was a crime, let's not forget, to kill or shoot an Aboriginal person without it being self-defence. So none of this was legal. Any incidents that happened were punished by law. But the skirmishes hardly amount to what you would call a war.
Yeah, well, I've seen passages from our new national school curriculum that portray the Indigenous culture pre-settlement as almost biblical, like the Garden of Eden, that they lived in harmony with nature and harmony with each other. You're saying that's a little bit different to the actual truth, aren't you?
Well, Cawthorne's notes show very clearly that even his small tribes in Adelaide, which he was following, had more than a dozen weapons of war that they used to use on their tribes, and he would describe how they often would fight just for fun. It wasn't like a peaceful... I'd love to see an activist, any female activist in particular, go back to pre-colonial days and live in these cultures, because I guarantee you they would not. I mean, European culture gets a lot of crap for being patriarchal. Well, these were some of the most patriarchal cultures in history. Women had no rights. They basically were traded. They had children, and then at about 35 to 40, they were discarded as wives. So it's not exactly a feminist utopia that it's being made out to be.